All right. Chat chat is visible. We are ready to go. Within 60 seconds of the start time, counting that as a win. Okay, so this is unrelated stuff. Doing some resolve automation for this week in Bevy, but that is for later, not right now. Skeen, Blender. Hey, how's it going? Good morning. Or morning here. I don't know where it is by you. Panel, this is the 0.15 game, and this is some notes that I was taking. Okay, let's move these across to the other desktop. And close that one. Open a new terminal here. I am doing cold today, actually. It is like, what was the temperature? 66 right now, which I guess is not cold for a bunch of other people. This is give me Celsius. 19 Celsius. 66 Fahrenheit. So not like freezing or anything, but I don't know, just a little bit cold for the overnight dip, you know? A little bit like my hands are a little bit cold. How are you doing today? I guess, do we stay in the same directory is the question. I think we don't. I think we just go into a temp directory. 50-50 on it. I think this isn't the example. So let's do my temp directory. We'll do Skeen test 001. Actually, we won't do that. We'll do Bevy new Skeen test 001. That's right, the Bevy CLI that nobody is using yet. Open this up. We need the path back to the other directory, unfortunately. So two things. We need to update the, well, we don't need to update the library, but I think it's a good idea to update the library. So let's update Skeen to the latest version of Bevy main and make sure nothing breaks. And then we'll pull over into this test project and see if we can get it to work in a test project. Because that's about where we are at the moment. Haven't done any work on it since last stream, so wherever we ended off is where we are. So we end up with, why is this so close to that? We end up with path equals this, I think, which should give us the Bevy plugin, and then the Bevy version needs to be git something rev something. So the question is, what are we using inside of Skeen at the moment? This should be a really easy upgrade. I don't think anything changed. But we're on a version from a couple weeks ago, if I remember correctly. A version of main a couple weeks ago. So I'm just going to grab That looks like it didn't pass. For WASM, I think we're good with that. I think we're okay with it not passing on WASM at the moment. So where's our editor for Scheme? There it is. And then we need to swap this in for all of these dependencies. Saturday JSON should be fine. Those are really the only dependencies we have. We also have tracing. I think that's fine. I don't remember if Bevy re-exports that for libraries or not. So let's run our tests. Conflicting for sin. Let's do a clean, an update, and a test. I'm not expecting this to have any issues, but if it does, then we can deal with them. So let's get the revision in there. Let's grab the Bevy repo here. And then I guess I should switch my face cam back to the other side. I don't know. Feels weird because on the left-hand side, it misses, like it interferes with the terminal. On the right-hand side, it interferes with like the UI of the Blender add-on that we're building. So put myself up in the top corner or something. I don't know. Should probably just make the screen smaller and open up some space on the side, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's cargo build this. Failed to select a version. Oh yeah, did it auto populate the lock file here? That's one of the things that I can't decide whether that should be in these templates or not. I feel like Bevy knew, because I do so much work on main and stuff, I feel like Bevy knew should have like a dash main or something like that that'll pull the latest main, or like a whatever, but that like extends to like different revisions and stuff, and like, is that really necessary? I could always wrap it, could always have my own template. Both of those would fix it. I think it's just because I do so much stuff with main that I feel that. I don't think anybody, well, not that anybody else doesn't do that, but all of our tests passed, so that's great. Not that anybody else doesn't do that, but like I think most people using the Bevy CLI won't be doing that. So, so what are we at here? We have some example in here, right? So those are glTF files, which we'll need. This is glTF. I think the event ordering gives us the best demo. So we'll replace this with that. And then what do we want to do with this? I want to build a small, like really small demo. I haven't tried any of the avian stuff yet. Where is, okay, I think I have an idea. So in examples, we have the 3D scenes. I think the 3D shapes scene contains a rotate component. So let's get rid of some of this documentation stuff, move all these up. And then this is the only thing we need to pull into the demo. And the other thing is we need to build in, I guess there is a way disabled BS. I guess there is a way to disable BRP, but you probably don't want that running for WASM. I don't know. We'll have to do some experimentation. So this will run, these shapes will rotate, and then I'm going to take the rotate component away, or the shape component, I guess. The shape component goes on any of them. So we'll get rid of all of the meshes basically. And we'll reinsert meshes from Blender. And then we'll add this shape component to those. So instead of having like Bevy generated meshes rotating, we will have Blender supplied meshes. So we have to compile everything basically from source and whatnot from Git, which always takes a little bit longer than a regular compile. But we're almost done. Oh, I didn't import the plugin. That's typically important. Why is that component giving an error? Oh, because of the documentation probably. So if we run this, hopefully it doesn't fail on that shape component. I don't know why that shape component is showing an error. Maybe it's something related to macros. So this is the demo, typically. And we are going to get rid of all of these. And the floor, basically. So how do I want to do that? I want to get rid of basically all of this. The debug material is interesting. It would be cool to like apply that. But we'll see. Let's get rid of the extents. Let's get rid of the shapes and the extrusions. We only need to apply the shape component, so I think I can remember that without needing to keep it around. Let's get rid of the lights and the ground plane. Let's get rid of like literally everything. Let's keep the camera. And then meshes here, debug material. I feel like I want to keep that around for later because that could be fun to like replace materials and stuff. Hey Chris, been great to following the Blender integration project these past weeks. Thanks. I'm glad you're enjoying it because it's been quite a bit of like, I don't want to like maybe heads down Python, which is more Python than I've written probably in the last few years, if I'm being honest. So today we're just building a demo. I've taken the 3D shapes example, and the 3D shapes example should be running effectively nothing. This will apply wireframes, but there's nothing running at the moment. So we need to run this. And let's get rid of Blender over here, maybe. Thinking about how I want to do this. I think I want to keep the command line around in case anything goes wrong, so I'll run it from the command line again. And We'll maximize it for the moment. Let's get a save going on in here. I don't know that I have direct access to the temp folder. Where is temp? There's temp. Now the question is, what did I name this? I have a lot of temp folders. I should probably delete some of those at some point. Okay, in here, we'll create a new folder called assets. And this will be called, I don't know, what are we going to call this? Scenes.blend. It seems like a bad name, but I don't have a better one. You would recommend commenting the light. In my case, the lights were not exported to glTF from Blender. In case everything is black, you might need to uncomment. It shouldn't be black. I think the point lights should export. But we'll see. Because that's something that, like, you will want to place lights in Blender and get them into Bevy. Like, that's a thing that people will want to do. So I'm okay with running into that now, if that is an issue. Okay, so here is our cube. We are going to fetch the Bevy type registry on this cube. That's from the running app. And then we'll have, I don't think we didn't register our component here. Oh, you know what? Actually, I don't think I went back and fixed marker components. We'll see. This is why we're doing a test run. So if we register shape and we run, we don't have reflect on this. Why don't our examples have reflect? I guess it makes sense. Like, reflect isn't really something you always need. I do feel like for everything that I want to do as a more advanced user, I want that always. Let's fetch the registry again. And then the question is, is that enough, or have we already hit a workflow issue? I was logging out all of the types recently to check, on the last stream actually, to check whether we would, oh, key codes is going to take up all of my terminal history. All right, we won't scroll back. I do think that we have accidentally cached something. We fetch the registry, right? Then shape should be in here. And it does get registered. Oh, you know what? Actually, there we go. I guess I just didn't click the right button. I don't know. So insert this. Component has no data to modify. This active editor needs to go away. I think this is the same issue that we were seeing on stream at the end of last stream, where it tries to show an editor for a value that it doesn't have an editor for. So in this case, we shouldn't be showing an editor at all. And you can see that from the marker components, like there's no data to modify. But let's save this and export a glTF. We got Skeen enabled. We got custom properties enabled. I think we want the glTF just because we are the developer. Yeah, okay. So I think this is the marker component having an issue. So I think we need to fix that. Quargs, gather node. We end up with a shape component with a type path of scheme shape and no value. That's the issue. So I think in our export plugin is where that issue is happening. We have two places we can fix this. If we are in the exporter and there is no value, we could just set that to an empty object. I think that might hide issues potentially. So this early, I think we want to set the value of the marker. Trying to think through that. If we have a marker component, that should get set to an empty object. If we look at the, where is it? Not the component tests. Where did I put those tests? I think I put them in lib, not in scheme dev. That's the Python stuff. So we've got a marker component here. This is the output that we need. We need this empty object. If we do it in the exporter, then anything that doesn't have a value will get an empty object, which I'm not sure is the right behavior. It's the right behavior for markers, which should be the only time it happens. Maybe we try to print a log out if we're doing it. Marker. Trying to think, because we do set up the form in the Python, right? So insert Bevy component, right? When we insert this component, the form to object should fire. So this is update component data. I believe this fires whenever we insert. Let me double check that. Saturday already, nice. Monday stream, let's go. Only point lights and spotlights are inexportable if the option is enabled. Yeah, okay. Again, I do think people will want to do that in the general case. Like, if you're working with Blender, then you will want to use Blender to define where lights are and how strong they are and things like that. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And let's pull Blender back over here because we're going to be staring at the logs. And I will insert here. So update component form, insert Bevy component, update component form. So we don't actually update component data here. Update component form is in not the insert. So the insert just takes we could do it here. Right, we're adding name and type path here when we insert. Let me check to see. Oh, actually, whenever we... Okay, let's remove this. When you do shape, which is a marker component, here's our data for shape. We have the component reflection. We have no properties. We have no like enum values. We have nothing of that kind of key label here. It does say it's a struct. It does say it's an object. There is no properties field though, which means it's a marker. So when we insert, that fires, and this inserts the component and updates the component form. And then when we clear the components on select new component, oh, when it's empty, we have an issue. Oh, okay. All right. All right. That's actually a different bug. That is completely unrelated. It doesn't impact the functionality at all, which is why we've never seen it before. But we do a print for the JSON dumps in selected component, which is on select new component. This is just a debug function. So really what we should be doing is we have data here. If selected component in data, I think is the move. And this. So if the key exists and the registry was fetched, then we can print that, and that'll get rid of that other bug. You've never followed a live stream before, Chris. Now I also watched John's stream yesterday. So 3 days in a row, you may need to be examined by a doctor. Congrats, you are now a live stream viewer, a participant in the live streaming ecosystem. You might have to be rewritten in Rust. That's okay. They're still working on mine. Okay. So shape here never, like we never get to update the value of a form that doesn't have values. So when do we do the insertion? I think the insertion makes most sense to do when we're setting the component, right? So like component value is object. And this is this might be the right place to do all of the data insertion, if I'm being honest. Because we already have the code to reserialize when we open the blend file. And we don't do any kind of value setting when we insert at all currently. So I think we give defaults to everything. The only thing that I can't remember giving a default to is actually the enums. If we give defaults to everything, then I think we don't need to do this, except for the fact that, oh, if we give defaults to everything, then do we not need to do this? That's a question. I think the answer is yes for markers. So we need to determine whether this is a marker component or not. Which I feel like I have logic for already, but I can't remember where I put it. It's the problem with splitting everything up into files. So this enum property doesn't have a default. We should set a default here at some point. Unfortunately, the defaults that we have access to aren't the defaults that you will use inside of Blender. So if you set a component inside of Blender, inside of Bevy, if you set a component inside of Blender, you have to set all values because all values will be exported. So you don't get to use any of the defaults currently. Like you don't get to do ... default effectively. I think we should have defaults for those. I think there's other places that will want defaults, but we will, make a default value. So there's a bunch of little like small things that we need to update, but nothing really that important. So the question is, when we get to struct, if properties do stuff, otherwise we just register. So there will be no annotations for a marker component when we're inserting. So when we're here, where did I type that? Hopefully I didn't break anything. If data get annotations being empty isn't enough. I think it needs to be struct and empty. What is the right incantation for annotations? Get annotations. So if not get annotations and let's see, we didn't import inspect. That's what the warning is. If component type is, do we do is or double equals? Struct and if it's a struct, I guess we don't need to do that either if we have the component data, because if we look at the component data for failed to find empty string, shape will not have properties, but it will be a struct, and I think that's how we define a marker component. I don't think we have any other, so I don't need that. I don't think we need to do the inspection of the annotations. So if component type is struct and component or properties not in component, then the value component is the wrong thing to do here. If data then component value. I think that's what we need to do. So let's copy that in. Let's save this and close, and Blender, which we've never done that sequence before. Let's open that scene. Remove that component, and then we need to insert shape. Insert shape. Save, export glTF. Include custom properties, keep it as separate. Scene. Okay. And then we still have an issue here. Interestingly, we have the same issue. So maybe I got ahead of myself. Here, insert. I copied it over, right? I saved the files that I was modifying. Let's do this. Print. Setting marker component to empty object data. Not setting data for marker. Type, struct, and property is not in data, right? No, not type. Kind. That was the issue. Kind struct and property is not in data. Let's do our loop again. This is why we do testing before we send it to people. Scheme scenes, remove. Let's get the insertion for shape. Insert. Export. I wish these settings kept. Remember export settings. Export. Okay, so export works. See, we've got the empty string or empty object value there now. So now, after fixing a minor bug, we have, let's get rid of this workflows directory. We have a glTF that has a skein array with shape in it. So in main, I think I can remember how to spawn this offhand. I don't think I can. Commands that spawn scene roots. Is that it? That doesn't sound quite right. This is an object, isn't it? Maybe it's not. I cannot for the life of me ever remember what this is. Why are no code actions available? Is it not scene root? Did I completely even mess up the name? 3D, glTF. Luckily, remembering the name of the thing you need to spawn is not a requirement for anything. Scene root, asset server, asset server, asset server. That makes sense. Needs to be a handle. That makes more sense. Asset server, res, asset server. That's not how you spell that. I wish any of these case conversion algorithms like dealt with underscores and stuff correctly. I feel like they always do not the thing that I wanted it to do. Which is fine, but okay, so this is a cube from Blender with a component that we added via Skeen, rotating. And hitting space to toggle wireframes breaks the world. I don't know why that is. Wireframe config global. Maybe there's something that isn't set up. I don't know. Maybe wireframes are broken on main. That's possible. We didn't test it for the actual example, so maybe I should do that too. Just to make sure it's not us. To do that, I will have source bin 3D shapes. Cargo run bin 3D shapes. So this should run, be the default, and then if we hit space, yeah, okay. So wireframes are broken on main. Which is fine. That's a thing. As long as it's not us. That's fine. My guess is that somebody already has seen this. Maybe nobody has seen this. I'll leave myself a note for later. Are wireframes broken as of? Cool. I bet you that people already know that, and there's just no issue for it. But just to check into it later. You don't really get why exporting the custom properties is still necessary. If the Skeen option is enabled, the necessary glTF extras should be set by the Skeen add-on. So let's go talk about that. Let me get rid of some of these logs that we don't need. Commit this. I feel like that's more change than I thought there was going to be. This is just logs and stuff, right? Yeah. Oh, and unlocking everything. Okay, cool. I didn't commit last stream. So unlock all components for processing and insert empty object data for marker components. Development is not really a directory I feel like committing yet. Yeah, okay. So TLDR for the export extension, which is what we're doing for stuff, is that I'm looking for glTF2 object.extras. And glTF2 object.extras doesn't exist unless custom properties is enabled. And I don't know how to access that data without it. Maybe if I print glTF2 object, copy that over, save this. This will be a good test. Type registry data. Oh, right. Because so we need to open the file. The type registry data is here. So when the blend file gets opened, we read in the cached file for the registry request, which means that you don't actually have to have the app running, which is good. And then we're here, and if we do this export, we've remembered the settings. So we have custom property enabled. If we export, then we end up with a node object, which is an IOC and glTF2 node object, which is not, as I understand it, the Blender object. And then this is the extras data right here that we're printing out. So the reason we need that enabled is if we don't have this enabled, that doesn't show up. So that data doesn't show up in extras. So the question is, oh, here's Blender object. Maybe Blender object skein. Maybe I was just being silly, and maybe this will just work. Open this, export this, hit the export, and we get the OB cube and skein. Hey, Elderson, how's it going? Did I not save this file? No, I did save this file. ID prop. Do I need to dict it? Unfortunately, the documentation was quite lacking. Oh, that's not what we want. I want to open our other blend file. Now we want to export because we have the data. Hit the export button, and then list doesn't have to dict. That's great, actually. So if this is a list, then we should be able to do this. Instead. Do the Blender dance. Let's open that file. Let's export that file. Hit the export button. We get a list of BPy ID props, which feels really weird. So in our exported file, which would be over here, that glTF still has the data, but we don't get the debug for that when exporting. So let's see if it works without custom properties enabled. Right? Turn that off, hit export. And then it fails on the debug log, hopefully. Yeah. So can we do skein in Blender object? And then get rid of this log. And then hopefully print object. This sets extras. I think that's the issue, actually. I think coming back down to it, the issue is that we want extras. I wonder if extras is even an object. Right, if we export, we are currently enabling custom properties. And if we enable the custom properties and we look at it, then that looks like it worked. If we disable custom properties in the export, then we can't set custom properties. So really, we need custom properties, or we need glTF extras specifically. And this menu item seems to enable or disable our access to that. So to not disable, or to not enable, oh no, wait. In gather hook, why are we still looking at skein? glTF. Yeah, glTF2 object extras, and then we set that. We would have to forcibly set extras, which feels wrong, right? Like, because it's a property, not a thing. So we would have to like set adder here, right? But it doesn't exist because we disabled. I don't know how to convey a dependency like this. I guess theoretically we could have our own extensions object and put everything that we wanted in that extension. let's see, if dot extras is none, glTF to object dot extras, set it to an object, and then set our skein array. Feels weird that we would have to do this kind of thing. I feel like we should be able to register the fact that we need this enabled somehow. But I'm not convinced that that actually would work. Okay, so whatever we just did continues to have our data, which is great. We love having our data. And then, actually, what was the way that we just exported? Because I didn't look at the settings. That was with including custom properties, and yeah. So we don't get to control whether object or extras exists or not. Right? If not. Oi. Oi. All right. We still have one more check. We have one more chance at this working. This has absolutely been the life cycle of the Blender add-on. Okay, so this is with custom properties, export. Looks like it worked. And did work. And export. I don't know why it's doing that. Blender's the only thing that does that. Without custom properties, works, and continues to have our data. Okay, so it does work. So we're good. We don't need that enabled anymore. Unless you want to set your own custom properties. In which case, our stuff will still work. So you will always be exporting this extras. Unless you have skein disabled. Which is good. That's good for us. That's good for the users too. Now, unfortunately, this means that we don't get any good debug information here. I did really like having like the exported data able to show up here. So maybe this should be a property in the extension. You should be able to turn this on and off in the extension, I think. So let's do to do use property in extension options to enable printing of extras data. I don't know. I feel like we should be able to find a way to print this out anyway. I don't know. We don't need custom properties enabled anymore, so we can turn that off. Self.report is not available here. You're not watching live, had to go for a bit, but to write glTF extras, you do not get all custom properties to be exported to glTF extras. You do get to control if they exist or not. Yes, I see you not watching live, and I raise you a response whenever you get to this point in the video. We have figured it out. I think printing this object is useless, so we won't do it. I don't love not having this data, but it is what it is. Maybe we'll come back here and do better logging at some point. And don't clip that for when I run into an issue. Okay, so all of that happens, and that means that we export. We don't need custom properties anymore. We can export here. We end up with init glTF2 export extension and gather node hook. So this init runs. This pre-export hook does not. IDK2. This runs. Those are the only two things that run. So pre-export hook never runs. And glTF callbacks need to be rooted. And pre-export hook doesn't run, but gather node hook does. Okay. Oh, you're good. I appreciate, Xavier, I appreciate you commenting regardless. I am completely comfortable with asynchronous communication like that. I started using Todoist and I put my streams on it, and it just gives me anxiety to be like, oh, this is due now. I really don't like that. I need to figure out a way to not have that. Like, due dates like that stress me out. Or rather, it's not the due date that stresses me out. It's the notification of the due date. It's like the re-pinging of a thing that I know that I'm already doing. Okay, anyway. We do need to get rid of active editor here. So maybe we do that. Our test is still working. Although we have to run it differently now because I added another bin. So our test is working here. I can't tell if this light is enabled or not. Visibility, relations, transform. Having this relations thing here is going to confuse people as well. There we go. Data. Let's export this. And run. Yeah, I'm just testing the behavior. So we think punctual lights is it, which all still works. And then we run this, and that is in fact the thing. So we now have a light here and a rotating cube from Blender. And I think that it would be cool. Let's see, setup is here, debug material, right? Let's do derive, resource, struct debug material, handle standard material, commands.insert resource, debug material, debug material. Why is this an issue? Let's find out. If we run, the compiler tells us invalid resource. No. Really? Because we need a semicolon? Okay, fine. So all of this happens, and then I think what we want to do is we have two options. We can create a component and listen to the on add. Which gives us access to the world. So I think that would work. And I think that would let us swap out the standard material handle at that point. I think that's the earliest possible place we could do it. So if we derive component, reflect component, we didn't merge auto registration, right? If we have use debug material here, then what is it? On add is the new derive macro to do that. Where is the component derive? Require this is what I was looking for. So fn u on add, which apparently it can't autocomplete. Sick. On add. And then what do we get here? We get deferred world with the component ID and the entity. We'll import these things. We will world dot resource debug material. I think dot clone. So let debug material equals this, right? As a shared reference to the debug material. We want the actual thing. Should be a handle, right? Oh, you know what I didn't? That should be a handle, right? Handle standard material. Oh, yeah. Okay, oh, never mind. I'm... dot zero is the handle. And dot clone gives us the clone of the handle. I don't want to hold access into the world is what I'm trying to not do. So because this is a handle, this is basically very cheap to clone. It's like cloning an ID kind of thing. So we end up with a handle to that standard material. We end up with what? World dot. How do I insert a component here? World dot entity. F as world entity fetch. That now takes not just one but multiple entities because we have entity set now in main. I think this should work. This is entity ref, I think we want entity mute. I think we want oh, can we not insert here because of deferred world? I can't remember off the top of my head. We can't query other things. So can we get a reference to that standard material then? Let's look at the dev docs so that we're up to date with what we're working with because we're working with main. Initializing resources, registering components, or spawning entities. So I think we've already registered components. Like the standard material stuff is already registered. So I think we can just commands it. And then debug material. And this has to be a mesh material 3D because we new typed everything in 0.15, and this is an issue because why? Because I didn't label it as mute. And we'll underscore this because we're not going to use the component ID. And we'll run this, and we haven't set that component on anything. Oh, we have. Incorrect number of function parameters. Did I not look at dev docs when I was doing onadd? I did not. What is the current function signature for onadd? Deferred world and hook context. So that's this. Unexpected token. Shouldn't we be able to destruct? Oh, you know what? Okay. We don't have the type. Okay, so component ID and caller, we don't need either of those. We only need entity. So this is our new function signature. We should be able to run this now. This should be able to pass data over to Blender if we fetch the registry and we click on the cube, go to objects. We still have shape enabled here. We should have debug. Maybe I messed up. I think I don't reset components. Oh, use debug. No, I think I don't reset components. So this, no, I do clear that. Oh, we didn't register it. That's why. We are working with a heavily, we are working with APIs that heavily depend on reflection and registering types. And I've forgotten to register the types for both of the components that we've worked with already. If we land auto registration, I will be so happy because clearly I can't remember to do that myself. Fetch registry, use debug material now shows up. We insert that. It's here. We save, we export. We do not have custom properties, but we do have lights. We export. In our export, we do have now shape and use debug material because we haven't updated to use the latest yet. So now we can run this and see it fail. So the question is, why did it fail? Let's get we do get to here, we do get to the entity, we do get to the mesh material 3D with the debug material. This is the right thing to do, right? Standard material. We don't need to remove it, right? Do we have eGUI inspector? You could check what it looks like at the end, perhaps. We do not. We do not have eGUI inspector because we're working on 0.16, like the main commit from this morning. So we don't actually have anything that can check. We can write our own system, of course. Right? We can do in update, probably on key press would be better, but let's do debug. Let's just call it debug, dump everything in it, and then run if on is on key code not a thing? What is the, I can never remember what this is supposed to be. Common conditions, schedule input, common conditions, input just pressed is what we're looking for. Key code, I guess space is fine. Why not? So debug will then query for any entity with a mesh material 3D. For data in query, not that. For data in query, debug data. Commands dot entity data dot 0 log components. Just for kicks. We don't have that many entities, so it shouldn't be that much of an issue. And we'll do commands is commands, and do we need to specify standard material here? We do. And we import our run condition. And if we run, I should be able to hit space here, which unfortunately will toggle the wireframes. But that shouldn't affect our information. Oh, that's rough. Yeah. It would be nice if Bevy Inspector eGUI, if we had a built-in Bevy UI version. I know that's something that Bevy maintainers want to have. But we don't have one right now. So it is what it is. Okay, so we have a strong handle on a mesh material 3D, and another strong material index 1 path scenes. We have two entities here. We have used debug material on this one, and glTF material name on this one, which makes me feel like we have attached it to the wrong thing. So that's our issue. Our issue is that we need to remove it from this and add it to this. But we haven't built the ability to attach components to meshes, and that is critical for replacing materials. That's what that is. I think we can get away with doing this in the exact same way. We just need to figure out how to select the mesh material or the mesh object. Unfortunately, I don't think we have like a hierarchy dump. But basically what is happening here is that we have the container entity, and a child of that container entity is the actual thing with the mesh material on it. So when we stick the mesh material here on the component insertion, that is not where it needs to be. I don't want to solve that in our component hook. That feels like it would be weird. The children are constructed at that point, so I think we theoretically could. It would be interesting to know if we like full on could. Right? It would be awkward to do it this way. But we could query for children using world. We could get those children with the entity, and then we could go into those and change the material. So we could kind of like drill down like that. Obviously, I don't like that as like a real solution, but that would work. The real solution is to put our menu into this menu as well. So the question is, this is object properties. This is data properties. And we have our panel. This goes back to what Xavier said on the last stream, where they have a use case where they want to like mark different materials. Part of why I'm doing this is because of that. So we end up with the skein panel. The skein panel looks for context.object. Context is what? And then skein panel shows up in properties in object. And I don't know if we can modify this. We might need to copy this whole thing. That would be really awkward. It is only the one function, but it would feel very awkward to duplicate all of the logic. Let's figure out how to actually, you know what? Yeah, let's figure out how to target the right thing. So in here we need context, which is bpi context. And then do we get like a data, blend data? No. Space data, workspace. So we're using object, which is the current object. Mesh feels wrong. Like at first blush, it seems right, but I think it feels wrong. color attributes. Maybe it is correct. UV layers. I don't think we're going to see anything in here that is actually like. Make a mesh from a list of vertices until we have a nicer way to make geometry use this. Oh. Okay. Cool. At least there's a bailout for that. The question is, if we duplicate that panel and we target .mesh if it exists, is that what we're looking for? Let's just give it a whirl. In that case, I think the only thing that really matters here, this object has a bunch of stuff on it. And I think all of this can get pulled out. And then the only thing that we actually need to swap is this. So let's pull this out then. Draw generic panel. Context. And then this goes back. This is context and object. And layout, let's say. So then we end up with this for draw, and we draw generic panel, context, object, layout. And the goal here is to have no affected functionality in our regular panel, and to be able to do BL ID name object PT. Is this, I don't know if that's actually, is this mesh or data? Let's try to find out. BL context. String default. To do, explain the possible combinations. Sick. The category. ID name. If this is set, the panel gets a custom ID. Otherwise, it takes the name of the class used to define the panel. If the class name is object PT hello, then it's okay. So BL ID name is ours to work with. Space properties, region window, context data. Where's this? It says data. And this says object. So I'm going to go with that. Object properties, panel for an object. So theoretically, if we do this, that should work. You went back in time again. You can work around the object mesh entities by setting the material to all children of the object entities that have a mesh channel. Yeah. So we can definitely reach into the children. I don't want to. That is not like the solution the tool that we're building should provide, is that you should be able to do this directly in Blender and not have to work around it like that. You should only have to specify the component or specify the data in Blender, and that should work for you. So we can do it the other way. I don't want to do it the other way. So let's check to see. It doesn't look like it's in here. This is import lib. I was just working with import lib, not in this file. I think that's because I didn't register like this. So let's do init. And mesh. And then this is unregister both of them. And I'll copy this and go all the way to the top and drop these here. So that should be all of our imports. Let's get rid of Blender. Let's pull Blender back up. I am on some level just kind of hoping that targeting, because we've written everything to target like random objects, that this should just work. But add-ons, what is the issue with the add-on? glTF export extension. Cannot import name pre-export hook. Oh, because I deleted the export extension hook. That's my fault. Do we need this here? No, not draw export, sorry. It would go here, I think. And then at least self, but I don't know what else this takes offhand. Blender will tell us when it boots up, hopefully. Heavy skiing. All right. I deleted something that I shouldn't have deleted. Chronos. glTF. That's not how you spell Chronos. Export extension. Importer exporter. Example add-ons. Why do I recognize this name? Anyway, exporter extension, init, y. Okay, init gather node hook, pre-export callback, post-export callback. Are these both necessary? Is this necessary? One thing that the glTF export add-on does is it just kind of like arbitrarily goes in and grabs names from a module. So you do have to get everything exactly right. Pre-export hook. The other thing is that there's like a little readme in here somewhere. Like this. And I think this goes into the class. I think this is what I need. Kind of annoying that it's not just like, hey, you need to define this, and instead it's like full on import error here. Cannot import name pre-export hook from. So is it not that? Is it here? Then it wouldn't take self. Also, all the parameters in the README documentation is sometimes out of date. Yeah, I can see that being the case. The unfortunate issue is I had this working, and then I was like, let me clean this up without testing it. Okay, that was it. We need that function at the end here, the pre-export hook. I don't know if we need these two. Is now a good time to check that? I don't know. Weird to have glTF pre-export callback and also pre-export hook, but it is what it is. Okay, so we get Scheme Bevy panel here and Scheme Bevy panel here. That doesn't render anything. And that's because the mesh attribute or the mesh object has no attributes. I almost feel like I wanted to find this here, but I think it has to be in a register. This is something that I was running into when I was trying to write tests. So if we do bpy.types.object, right? Then we have the component data and the active index, right? And these two things need to be set for any object that we're working with, which in this case, I believe is mesh. And then we've got a selected component on the window manager, which I don't think will matter all that much. One other thing to test to look around for is that the data panel will probably be also visible for all data types, lights, curves, etc., and not only meshes. Cool. Okay, so that's good. And then we could theoretically load the registry here, but we aren't running the application, which is fine. Let's do an open of our scheme scene. Don't save this. And this is the mesh stuff, and this is the object stuff. Object stuff has shape. Mesh stuff needs use debug material, which hopefully we'll be able to insert. We cannot insert. Why can't we insert? Because I'm inserting the wrong thing. It's going to exist in object. Yeah. Okay. So insert Bevy component onto object is what's happening here. I don't think we can pass that many values in. I think we can set one string, but I think we need to duplicate this, unfortunately. Is there a way for us to tell that we're in the mesh panel here? I don't know offhand. I also don't know that I want to rely on it, even if we did find something. I know that we can have properties for operators. Nested properties, copy data path, simple data access. I guess this would be in context if it were anywhere. Style conventions. Avoid copying lists. Passing strings. Error handling. Time your code. Context. Area? No. I don't know that I want to make this contextual anyway. Several previous page nows. On the previous page, there was a link to use operator. Hey, crowds, how's it going? Let's see. Which page was I on? I was on operators, and then there was using operators. Stale data, UI context, modes, and mesh access. When working with mesh data, you may run into the problem where a script fails to run as expected in edit mode. Bones. Naming limitations, Unicode problems. Okay. Operators. Let's go just for, this is just the operators. Okay. Action operators, asset operators. This is just a giant list of operator types. We're going to have to search for something outside of the Blender search. Okay, here's an operator, options, ID name, execute. This checks preferences. Yikes. Blender operator with arguments. Unfortunate. Custom operator with arguments in some random ad infested forum. Custom operator with arguments. Self.var. So init and var and execute has var. Doesn't work. Hey, define the int property. Great, that's what we want. Class method. Doesn't show me how to set. There we go. There we go. Simple operator with an argument. But then how do you attach that to a button is another question. This is so complicated. Operator mesh add, yeah. Row operator, object operator, text operator, dot prop. Okay, cool. So like this, and then we just set properties on that operator. Whew. That was a journey. So for insert Bevy component then, we need something like this. I don't really understand what poll is, but I guess it doesn't run in certain cases. And this is self dot whatever. So really, this should be mode, which should be it's unfortunate that you'll have to set this bpi.type or props dot the types or props would be really great. Props dot enum property, right? I have this code somewhere else. We could always set this to a string too, but I don't want to do that. Yeah, poll is to check if the operator is callable according to the context. Yes. You think this 2012 way to set operators to the button operator is deprecated? Okay. If it's deprecated, then how do I find how to do it? Right? Right, like property argument, like where in the documentation would I find what the current way to do this is? Because it doesn't seem to show anywhere. Like I'm absolutely open to like doing this in the wrong way, but here's calling an operator, but we need to have it be a button, and we need to set the property on the button because we need to do dot prop, right? Execution context. It's also possible to run an operator in a particular part of the UI. For this, we need to pass the window area and sometimes a region. Cool, I guess. This is just like restricting it to get called. Here's the window in the area. It's nice that they don't provide the way to define that in any way or use it. Yeah, I mean, I see that we can call them with arguments. Unfortunately, because we have to set it as a button, we don't get to actually just call it as an argument, which is not my favorite. Panel, items, property group, items. Here we go. I need items with these tuples. Where are we? We are in panel right now. We're in insert Bevy component. This needs to be this kind of a thing. This is object, we'll call it. And then mesh. And then I don't want default here. I want this to error out if it's not set. For insert Bevy component up, insert Bevy component operator. Okay, so we've got object and mesh, and that means execute should be one of these things, and object is none, right? So object is none before this, and then if self dot execute mode, right, equals object, then object is octave object, else object is context.mesh. I forget what we were, this is so long ago. And then skein, active component index, all of that should still work. And then we just need to set those values before we use them. So what was I looking for? The access pattern for context mesh. So I think it's context.mesh. Let's find out in the panel for the Bevy component. We need to take this and do it. Let's leave a comment here, I guess. This has to be this, and then this dot. Okay, so this is what we need to do here for the operator, which means in panel, we have operator. You know, it's really unfortunate is we're doing this generically. And we need to have this data. So I guess we had another argument. Execute mode, so object and mesh. And then in panel, operator, we just pass this execute mode around forever. That's exciting. And then operator here as well. And then I don't think we have any other operators. So I think that's good. Let's make sure we saved everything here. Copy for dev. Get out of here. Blenderize. Open recent. Well, let's make sure that nothing breaks first. Actually, the app isn't running and I don't feel like restarting it, so we're just going to skip that step. Bevy OT insert Bevy component object has no attribute execute mode. That is incorrect. Oh, I guess the remove we didn't set, right? Is that on the remove or is that on the... No, that's on insert. Okay, because it's on insert, we need to fix this. Are you making a Blender plugin for Bevy? Yes. We're actually mostly done with the Blender plugin for Bevy. Oh, return canceled. Yeah, okay. That makes more sense. What's the goal? So we actually already have it working. I haven't tried to re-export this yet. Yeah. Okay. So this is a Bevy application for which we have a component called shape. So it's a modified version of the 3D shapes demo. That component here, shape, has component derived on it and is reflected. We register that type with our Bevy app. That gets pulled into Blender, which hopefully will work in a second here. Okay, our execute mode didn't work. Okay, I can't show that yet. You'll see it in a second. So this gets pulled into Blender. We have a whole UI to insert those components and set the values of those components. This is a marker component, so you don't actually get much. And then this shape gets exported into the glTF file as glTF extras and instantiated on the objects that you put them on. So in this case, the shape is not being set on any of the objects. We've got the register type, we've got the struct itself, and we've got a query for that shape, but the shape has been applied in Blender. So that's why it's rotating. And that's it. That's the goal. The goal is to take the registry data from Bevy, get it dynamically in Blender, insert components in Blender onto objects, get that back into Bevy in the simplest way possible currently. So there's no like extra features on this. It's just if we sit here and we say fetch the Bevy type registry, then you can see that it did a bunch of processing. Unfortunately, I'm breaking the panel right now, but if you see like shape here, you should be able to select shape and then insert. There's an issue with this button that I'm currently dealing with. I guess we can't set that inside of draw. Is that correct? I don't know. op.execute mode has no attribute execute mode. Here's the execute mode attribute on the insert. Is there something else we did wrong? Var equals int property. It's all registered. Oy. Row.operator sum operator op.prop equals thing, and for us the execute mode is set here. That's an enum property. In our panel, we've got our operator, insert Bevy component, and the execute mode is here. If self.execute mode is none is better. Otherwise, some enum with a value of 0 might get cast to false. What do you mean? You mean for the... Where is it? For this? I can do that. That's totally fine with me. So the question is, why can't we access this property attribute thing here? I guess we don't care about that. Yeah, this isn't running in a hot loop or anything, so I'm not too worried about it. So we've got a label, we've got an operator, this registers, this tries to call it in a panel layout. It says we should do this. And I can't think of anything else. Blender custom prop operator. Okay, there's no property for curves. Great. Don't care. Options, register, undo, draw, pull, execute. In theory, operator and panel should work the same, but in practice, magic gets in the way. Sick. So maybe this doesn't need to be equals. Maybe this is semicolon or colon or whatever. Would be nice if there was docs. Would be nice. Okay, so fetch. Okay, it looks like that might have been it. Try to insert shape on this. Nope. No attribute execute mode. Oh, it's on remove. Okay, perfect. That's good. That's good for us. Let's grab this and throw it onto, or let's grab this and let's grab this. Actually, all of this. And all of this. And then we go over to remove and we need to fire this here and here. So we just copied and pasted that over, and this remove component should now also have the same thing. So we'll close this out and open our actual, and then I'll be able to actually show you the UI from earlier. Since you came in while I had actually broken it. Okay, so this is on mesh, this is on object. So we have this Scheme Bevy panel, which has shape here. Shape is a marker component, so we don't have any UI, but we can, remove this, insert this. All that works, which is wonderful. And then we go to mesh, and hopefully our use debug material will insert, and it does, into the right spot. Let's remove it just for kicks. So object has shape and mesh has use debug material. And then the question is, do those get included when we export or not? Nope, don't open Blender. So how do I do this? This is Scheme. There's a shape. So we don't have mesh components exported. So we need to look for a different Chronos gather mesh hook. It's going to be the same code. gather mesh hook. And then this is literally going to be this. Right? Properties enabled in Blender mesh. Blender mesh, right? glTF to mesh. So because this is an export extension, we actually have to install the extension to be able to use it. It's part of the reason I keep closing and reopening Blender, because the glTF extension will actually go look for the physical file from the add-on and actually get a class by exact name from that file. So it has to be there at that file location. This is the wrong project. Here we go. And there's use debug material. And there's our debug material. So now we can add components to objects, and we can add components to meshes. Now, there is no hot reload or anything that I've enabled. So if we export this, again, without the component, I hit space. Space is a bad key to hit because wireframes are broken. So space to toggle wireframes. Use debug material, insert, export, avoid hitting space at all costs. So now we've re-exported, we rerun, and it has the new material. How am I passing the component registry? Hang on, there's something going by. I will catch this Noibat on my phone while the fire truck goes by. Oh wow, so many emails, so many things happening. How am I getting the component registry into Blender? BRP, the Bevy remote protocol in 0.16 has a call that will give you all of that data. So if you look here, this is what gets written out. I'm going to save this just to format it so that you can actually take a look at it. Let's go look at, I guess, shape, since we were working with shape. So here's shape and here's debug material. And this is just fetched from the running Bevy app using the Bevy remote protocol. And this is the JSON data we get back for all of that stuff. Structs, objects, enums, a whole bunch of stuff comes back here. Primitive values again. So we use that data to build this component list, which you can then insert with an operator. This list is all of the components you've inserted onto an entity. We can remove any of those that we want to. This editor, I guess we don't have anything that would show up, right? We never want to use transform, so that is what it is. But, oh, right, transform. What is that? Interesting. So that we have some more debugging to do with the mesh stuff, but it works for whatever components, marker components. So this is back on the object. We have transform. Transform has rotation, scale, and translation, and you can just like modify this now, and then you would be able to export this, and it would sit. Can you check if the data panel is also visible for the camera or light? I think these might crash if used for those data type. Yeah, I can do that. And get rid of this. Let me save. And then particles. You want me to click on the light and then go to data, right? No object attribute scheme. So lights can have custom properties. And we probably want to actually enable that. So it crashes only because we haven't set the types up correctly. And we don't have the exporter gather for lights. So we can try that as well. Let me commit this first because we do have working code. We don't have anything else, right? Yeah, cool. So the question is a couple fold, right? We got a couple of other things in here. Gather textures, scene, sampler, node, material, glTF extensions. So supporting components on lights might end up being an interesting thing because I don't see like a gather light here. I do see a gather camera hook. So we could do cameras. Let me just dump this in here for later. If we find the camera, click on it. The camera panel doesn't have the objects on it, so we do need to add the types to the camera, which we should do because cameras are valid for putting components on. And then for the object, yeah, I guess we shouldn't put it on the camera data, should we? We should only put it on the camera object. Right? So we should filter this down to only show on certain, in certain contexts. How easy is it to do that? Right, we're drawing our panel here. This is the mesh panel for data, for window. Is there a pole here? Panel, panel, pole. Pole. Everybody's sometimes wrong, Xavier. Okay, so let me comment this out for a second. You kind of haven't gotten the bird's eye view, so it's kind of a glTF-based prefab editor for Bevy. Let's cover the flow then. So I'm going to walk you through how this is expected to work. This, the thing we're running here right now is just a demo application. This is regular Bevy application. It's using glTF to spawn this cube. The glTF is exported from Blender. And other than that, it is what you would expect it to be, right? So it's got main, it's got default plugins, it's got some systems, and so on and so forth, right? So we've got this setup function. It creates a debug material, saves that into a resource. It spawns a camera. It spawns some text on screen. It spawns the glTF. This is like a normal Bevy app. In this application, there are systems that operate on components, right? So shape is a component that we use to determine what things in the scene should rotate, right? And shape is not something that we apply to anything. This is the final result, by the way. Shape is not something that we apply to anything, right? So the only place that shape is applied is inside of Blender. So keeping that in mind, effectively the only thing we're doing here is spawning a glTF scene for our application. There's some other code for other things here, but that's the only thing that we're really doing. So what we want to do is to be able to expose our components inside of Blender. We have to reflect that data into the type registry, as you mentioned earlier, right? So we have reflection for use debug material and shape. In this case, we have a component hook on this component. So when it gets added, we can do something. In this case, we don't have a component hook. Both of those get registered right at the top here. And we have this Skein plugin, which is really just setting up BRP and adding an observer. So we go over to Blender, right? We start a new project, whatever. I guess let me save this. Right, so I start a new general project. This is a fresh, brand new Blender instance, right? I've got a cube. It's got nothing anywhere. So the first thing we need to do is fetch the Bevy type registry. Is our application running currently? No, it's not. So we do need to run it to interact with the Bevy remote protocol. So our Bevy application is running and we can fetch all of the data from our Bevy application. That gives us all of the registry information and allows us to construct this panel. This panel is for selected objects. So here's the camera object, here's the light object, here's the cube object. If, say, on this cube, we want to use that component that we defined inside of our Bevy application, we can insert that component onto this cube, right? We've effectively inserted a component onto the entity that is holding the cube now. And we can do this for a number of different things. In this case, like you usually wouldn't do a transform because there's already a transform in the scene, like the Blender scene. But you can sit here and modify, the transform to your heart's content. And you can remove these components and whatever. So these components now live like on this cube, so to speak. So at this point, after you've added a bunch of components, built a level, done something like that, you do an export via glTF. I'll make this bigger. You have to enable the Skein export extension. And then you can do either glTF or GLB. Both are the same thing. And then you hit export and it exports. And when it exports, which I didn't do because I already have it exported, what happens is the glTF extras for the cube have that component data embedded into them. So what we've done at this point is fetch the Bevy registry information from Blender. We've inserted components onto objects inside of Blender, and we've re-exported that data back out through glTF. So any way you want to export the glTF works. You will get this extras data here. Now the Skein plugin will take that data and instantiate those components. So it looks for this extras via the glTF extras component and reflects this data using the Bevy reflection system, and those components all get instantiated on the objects that you put them on. Resulting in this case, the shape component being added to the cube entity, which causes the system that operates on entities that have the shape component to rotate. Then the other thing we're doing is that use debug material component, which is also a marker component in this case, has this component hook. So when this component gets instantiated onto the cube, we actually just replace the material with this code using regular Bevy idioms, right? So when that component gets added, we replace the material with our own material. In this case, it's a UV debug map. And that's that. To prove that, I can actually just delete this stuff. If I delete these two things and I rerun the application, everything runs, but none of the components were there to be instantiated, so none of them get added. So this is the cube from the glTF file with no components on it. And if we add those components back, say we exported them from Blender or whatever, then everything works with all the components and everything. So it's basically TLDR using Blender as a Bevy editor. For the fetch registry operator, the pull function might be useful to gray out the button if Bevy app is not running. That would need to constantly pull localhost, right? How often does it do that? Displaying a message saying why it's not callable is better than getting an error when called. Yeah, I think there's two things here because you could also get it from a file. So I think there's a little bit more UX work to do there than just displaying the error message. Let's see. Let's close this. Don't save. And you can fetch the Bevy registry from anywhere. So I could fetch it from here too. And this is a traceback because we get an exception. Fetch Bevy registry. What is the exception that happens here? Connection refused error. And this is just the operator itself, which we have access to self in. So this is BRP fetch. So try BRP accept self.report. Do I have a report in here? Report error. Yeah, BRP fetch. This is also fine though, is the issue. So fetch Bevy type registry. We try to do this. If we can't do this, I guess this is a warning, but not. We haven't canceled yet, right? So we try to get it from the HTTP request. If not, this is not necessarily an error. If there's an error in the response, there is. I guess if we accept it is an error, right? If we can't connect. No, I don't think that's true. We pass and we continue. So we can do like BRP response, none here. And then we try to fetch. If we can't, we pass. If it's not none and error exists, then the request errored out. I guess we could warn here. This is the file, which we need to do a second error pass on. Does BRP have a health endpoint, so to speak? So there's a couple of different that's very nifty. You've actually struggled a lot in the past with creating reusable, parameterizable scenes in Bevy, although there are a lot of crates trying to solve this. Yeah, so if you wanted to, you could just set up a Bevy, or not, a Blender collection with preset components and stuff, and just copy that around, right? Like that would work. I haven't gotten quite to the high level documentation yet. We just got everything working, as you can see. Does BRB have a health endpoint? So the issue is that we can't connect to a Bevy app that's not running. So if we can't connect, that doesn't mean that we can't fetch the right thing. If we can't connect and we can't get the registry file that we've cached the response in, then it's an error. But both of these have to fail first. So would be nice if the Skein plugin told you that it can't reach the BRP server and disables the fetch button. I don't think so. I don't think there's a fundamental reason, or I don't think there's a fundamental UX difference between that button being disabled and getting an error when you click it. Because to make that button disabled, we would have to constantly be trying to fetch, right? It's kind of the idea of like, just ask for the thing rather than check to see if the thing can be asked for. And you might be running multiple Bevy apps at different times, and we don't want to like try to fetch the wrong thing. Right? I think that I want the user intent, right? I want you to have to say, I've set it up, fetch it, please. Yeah. I think there's also other UX considerations here. Right now, what we do is we always try to fetch over HTTP, even if we have a cached file, which is probably what most people want to do most of the time. But there could be situations in which you want to go only to the file and never fetch, right? Like you don't even want to try to fetch. Like you want to be running a different Bevy app, for example. And you don't want to fetch that Bevy app's schema because you're not working on it. You're working on a different project in Blender. So I think there's UX stuff to do here. The scene hook does a similar thing, right? So when the Blender file loads, we check for the file first and fall back to the HTTP request. So if you have the file, then everything works. If you don't have the file, then it tries to fetch. And if you explicitly call fetch, then it reverses that order. It does the fetch first and then checks for the file after. But I don't know. I think I need to do some UX thinking about those two things. Because when you open a Blender file, if it has a cached file, you want it to open that. And then really the only time you want it to update is when you want it, like when you ask it to update, right? And because you can do that so easily, right? If I do my menu here, it just says fetch Bevy type registry. I can just do it. Or I can go to edit and I can fetch Bevy type registry, right? I can do that from a number of different places. It's very accessible. Um, I think opting into it makes sense. We could also have a like auto update option in the properties. I don't know exactly how that would work. I don't really want to spam the network with requests, but that's the only way that we would know if a Bevy app was running. So I don't know. There's a lot of like UX thinking to do here, which is wild because it's like two things, right? It's like an HTTP request and a file open. Um, and that turns into what could everybody possibly be wanting to do at any given time? And how do we support them in doing that? All that to say, the button I don't think should be grayed out because I don't think we want to pull for that. Because I don't even know how often that pulls for. We don't want to spam the network. And we also don't really want to like leave it for too long, you know? And the only way that I can think of to accurately determine whether the user wants to update is whether they click that button or not. Also, the only way that that button is going to show up is if you don't have any data, right? So if you're opening a new Blender file for the first time, you do actually want to like decide where to fetch the data from. We don't just want to like greedily, spamming the network request per second. I don't know how often poll runs is the issue. I don't know if poll runs away and goes just as fast as it possibly can, or if it goes once a second or not. So that's something that I have to figure out. Right. Because this, if you're scrolling, can fire a lot of requests very quickly if this runs as often as draw does. I don't have a log in here for how often draw runs, but it will run like as fast as your monitor will refresh if you are like hovering over the panel kind of thing, you know? So like it wouldn't be 1 per second. It wouldn't also be like terrible either. But you could very easily send 100, you know? Like if you're sending 60 FPS requests to the Bevy application, I don't think that's useful. So that's the thing, right? Like once per second, sure. 100 times per second, 60 FPS, 240 FPS. I don't know. You could add it to bounce time. There's no configuration in the docs for this poll function. Right? Like if we write this poll function, I don't see any way to configure it. I also don't think this poll function is for that. I think it's for, anyway, it's a whole thing. There's stuff to look into UX wise. Absolutely. I agree. What are we going to do for now? I think for now, we want to report the error that's coming back because we're not reporting it. It's just throwing. So BRP response, accept, pass, try to get the file. If the error, then we self-report. Because this means you have an open running Bevy application. This could also potentially not be an error, right? I guess this is only if you fetch, thinking about it now. So this would be an error. And then we should do return canceled, right? And then should we return canceled here? I feel like we should report error and then try to also fetch it from the file. Which makes me feel like this shouldn't even report this error. This is definitely an error with communication with the Bevy application. But it doesn't mean that we don't have the file. And then this could also run an exception. So we also have to try here. Oh, you know what? This is actually just writing the file out, now that I think about it. This isn't fetching that file. So this is only, this is, sorry, I've confused myself. We have two ways of doing this. One is the hook that loads on a Blender scene. When you load a new Blender scene, it checks for the file first and then backup checks for the HTTP request. If you're running this, it only hits the HTTP request. So if we have an error, these are both errors, and they are final errors. Like, there is no secondary fetch here. If you try to fetch the registry, if you explicitly call the operator, it has to fetch from the Bevy application. If it cannot do so, then we return. That is the only thing that can happen here. And then if we do get data, then we write it out to the file for the cache for the next time you open. Sorry, I had streamer brain for a second there. Reporting an info or warning would be better if this is the case. Poll runs every time the operator is called and displayed in the UI. So for a button, every time the context or UI changes. So not at every redraw. Okay, that's good to know. I think I killed the thing, right? This is the error we get now. Could not connect the Bevy application to fetch registry data from the BRP. I think that is better than what we had before, which was just a dump of better than a stack trace. Yes, we're just going for better than a stack trace at the moment. There are definitely UX things to look at and work on here. I have also perfect, that works. And then if we are running and we fetch, then everything fills out and everything's good. There's definitely UX stuff. I am also not happy with the UX of like adding and editing these components. I would like to do more there. For example, if we insert a transform, we get WXYZ, XYZ. These could all be side by side, for example. I don't know how much we want to special case things. Special casing, the more we special case, the less maintainable it is, because if anything changes in the future, for example, if transform changes to not have TRS, but have like a transform 3D or something, then this could break. So I think that for the interim, for the short term, I'm going to work on supporting things and not making them the perfect experience. Aside from UX, what's the next feature I want to implement? The next one I want to implement, basically everything is working at this point. We've got objects with extras working. We've got meshes with extras working. Xavier said they had a desire for material components or material data. I don't know I don't know that that is something that we want to do. The reason being, what's going on outside today? The reason being that meshes and materials both go onto the same entity. So if you have components on a material and components on a mesh, they could collide. I also don't even know if putting extra data on a material would flow through correctly. So that's an open question. Here's a light. Let's try adding something to the light and see if it works to start with. Let's do shape. A light is a shape, right? Are we even in the right file? Let's not save this. None has no object attribute scheme. Was that in the last file or this file? That was in the load, which is interesting. I think I have this particular Blender file might have some extra data because I've been messing around with stuff. So I think that's okay for the moment. Okay, the cube has a component on it. Let's try to put a component on the light and see if it works. Let's try to put a component on the camera and see if it works. Basically, I have a list of stuff that is potentially worth working on. Let's see. So light here. Light gets materials. So we need to disable the mesh version of this or the data version of this for lights because it can go through the object. I don't think we have a camera in here. We didn't export the camera. Let's export the camera. Include cameras. This is going to be a little bit awkward because we already have a camera in the scene, so I'm expecting this to throw warnings. So we have multiple cameras in the scene. The camera is rotating, is what's happening here. So I think it's safe to say that the component lives in the glTF for the camera. But let's just check to be sure. Yeah, it does. So you can put components on cameras, on lights, on cubes, and other entities, and what else? On mesh data, which is very widely useful. That is like a lot of useful things, in my opinion. Let's remove this Bevy component and get rid of this. Let's not include cameras. So all of that works. That is a lot of useful functionality. I think if we go into object material, material could theoretically have components. We don't have the panel here yet. I don't know what happens if we do that, because if we look at materials, there are material extras, if I remember correctly. but I don't know what happens to those extras, right? If we do a test here, right? So we're on the material for the cube, right? And I'm going to do some custom property here for a string. I'm going to name it scheme test. I'm going to hit OK. We're going to make this working on material. I'm going to save that. We're going to export with custom properties. This is one of the nice things about the way we've written this plugin is that it literally is, when it exports, just custom properties. So if we ever want to try to add features and stuff, it just goes into extras like that. So we don't have to do anything special. If this plugin for some reason breaks, it's not special. Like it's not a piece of functionality or a piece of technology that you're unable to replace. And I really like that. So on materials, we get scheme test here. I am going to put, what else do we have? We have the thing on cube already, right? So cube has used debug material. Let's take that off for a second. And let's run, make sure that it doesn't show the material. And let's go for materials. Right, like this is all human writable, which is wild. Scheme object in here. So the use debug material is currently on the material itself. So if we allow that, then it does work, which is really interesting. So I think we support materials as well. Doesn't glTF already have a very flexible material spec? Yeah, and Bevy has its own like materials implementation, I guess. So the PBR stuff is common, right? Like a standard material, and then the glTF PBR stuff, and what Blender thinks of as a PBR material, those are all the same thing. There are potential futures in which Bevy can handle like material X, which as I understand it is like custom dynamic render graph stuff. Like it's cool. But not today. So I don't want to do anything too specific. But adding components to materials seems like it works. So I think we should do that. Let me add that to our to-do list. Here's development. To do documentation, we need to try to backport it to 0.15. Enable material extras. Disable data panel. For objects other than meshes. And then there's a couple of things like there's a couple of values that we don't currently support. So if you put a glam vec3 into your component, it currently won't work. The marker and nested enum situation needs a fix. There's, what was it, fog, distance fog that we were looking at on stream. If we put distance fog onto this cube, distance fog doesn't quite work correctly here. And I'm not exactly sure why, so I need to look into that. So documentation, BRP backport for 0.15 potentially. 0.16 is coming soon. Thanks for hanging out in the stream, Lawrence. Have a great rest of your day. There are material extras, but there's no material components because materials are assets. So this may get weird in my case. Probably not something the scheme needs to add without deep thinking. We can just add it to the extras and the components get added. That's it. Done. The like I feel like if that works, we should just let that work, because like this material now has that. If we have another mesh, and we add this material, it comes with that custom property. So this is your label here, right? This is your, like, this should work if we do that component thing, is my understanding. Because this is getting added to the material. So it's exactly what you want. We just need to turn the panel on. Actually, do we need to turn the panel on? I forget. I think it already works. We need to disable the data panel. And we need to enable the export. The export is easy though. What was I going to do here? I was going to do, right, the shape of the material. So if we export, and I'm going to get rid of custom properties, and we run this, these are both rotating, which is great. Failed to instantiate invalid value map, accepted map with a single key. That is the first Rust side error I've ever seen. I think that's distance fog. Really interesting that these show up as like empty objects here. I think that is, that's related to the form not working correctly. So let's get rid of distance fog on this other thing, since it doesn't even belong there. I'll export this, but failed to instantiate component data from Blender, invalid value map, accepted map with a single key. I don't think we get any other information here, if I remember correctly. In our lib, post-process, scene, this goes into this is this error. So we would get JSON component, and we actually don't know what JSON component is. So I don't think that we actually have any information to give the user here. We could potentially log object as well. That might be useful. What was I going to do? This runs. Oh, it's 11 o'clock already, dang. This runs. That doesn't have the debug material on it, because the debug material is a component. Yeah, okay. This is really cool actually. So let's get this material stuff working because that is actually very, very, very cool. Because then you can define debug material in Blender and have that completely get replaced inside of Bevy with anything. That is as a very common use case. I'm starting to get excited now that it's actually. Okay, so this is. Panel disable is probably a quick add to a poll function with a single line of code in the poll function. Yeah, but I don't know what to look for. I don't know what's on this context. Because what? Anything that doesn't have a mesh? I don't know what the right filter is. Right, context. Not what I wanted. Context. bpy context. And then mesh. Where's mesh? Global context. bpy.context.mesh is buttons context. Interesting that buttons context is the only one that shows up here. I guess that's layout context. Active object.type equals mesh. Cool. Let's check to see if that works. Oh, I didn't save the. Okay. We'll have to redo some of that stuff, but that's fine. So open settings, shape, mesh, light. Doesn't show up for light anymore inside of the light data, only shows up for light here. Cool. That's exactly what we wanted. And then export extension. Material hook. Gather material hook. Is there anything else here that we need? I wonder when gather camera hook is useful. This is the same function over and over. Maybe I do pass def gather source sync This is the only usage of self, so we'll get rid of that. And then this is gather on glTF to material, glTF to material extras. They are components. In Bevy, they're components. So we checked that, actually. I did that before. The debug material, I added to the actual material earlier, and it worked, right? So really what happens, unless I've forgotten what I did, really what happens is that the components for the material and the components for the mesh get merged. So you just need to understand that that's what happens if you want to not collide. So this is the logic. And then we can just gather in all these places. Okay, so they are components added to the entities using this material. What if somebody needs to add something to the asset, not the entities using it? I don't think you can add things to assets. We can work through that though. Copy for dev, get out of here. Blender. Open. Just making sure that our previous export logic all still works. This should have no custom properties, including lights, skein, export. Something went wrong. If skein and source, argument of type material is not iterable. Argument of type material is not iterable. So the question then, oh, Blender material. Always Blender thing, glTF thing. Open. Okay, so make sure our regular export works. Looks like it does. You worked around this by using a new resource that contains a hash map, mapping material weak handles to a new asset type. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we just did, right? Okay, so let's make sure Node, cube, skein shape, no extension, light, skein shape, extension or mesh shape, mesh shape, skein cylinder shape, meshes, use debug material. Okay, so this is all of the non-material stuff working as far as I know. We should have a debug material on the cube, not on the cylinder. And they should both be rotating, which they are, which is great. So we need to enable that pane for the material, right? Right, this needs to exist here. So we need another panel. We need material, 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 material. Hopefully this is material. Let's find out. Seems like it. Material, context dot material. And then for insert and remove, we now need to add material. I don't like this. I don't like that we have to add this to all of the things. That feels like a new contributor would mess that up. Especially since you also have to add it to this if. And turn this into a match. And then default is return canceled. That is not how you do the default, is it? Oh, case default. Unreachable. So this is what we need again for insert here. Get rid of some of these comments that aren't relevant anymore. Okay, so we have the panel that we haven't registered yet. We have it hopefully going in the right spot. We have the material context passed through. We have to add that here. We have to register and we have to unregister. Active material. Context.activeObject.activeMaterial. Okay, we'll go with that. If you just tried it and it worked, I trust that. I do think that context.material works. Maybe not. Yeah, so context.material seems like it works. So I'm going to try that first. And then I will. Yeah. Same thing, but read only. I think we're okay. open recent. So we've got objects. We've got, let's go down to this cylinder. Actually, let's not set it on the cylinder. Let's go to remove use debug material on the mesh data. Let's go to the material. Material object has no attribute scheme because we didn't add the types. So adding a new panel is a little bit complicated, but does show up immediately when you try to use it, which is fine. I'm okay with something that happens at runtime in a very obvious, straightforward way. Okay, open scenes. Remove that on data. Go to material. We've got the panel. We've got use debug material. Inserted. Save. Don't crash. Save. glTF. Export. Export seems to have worked. Let's just run it because running it is more fun. And then we get the UV material on both of them. So we can now put components on materials. Anytime you use that material on any object, it will get that material. So now we have a definitive way. I don't think we need this remove. We have a definitive way whenever anybody says, hey, I would like to replace this material with a Bevy material. What you have to do now is write this piece of code. You have to have a component that has a component hook that will replace that material for you. And that's it. Anytime that component, anytime that material gets spawned in, that component gets spawned in with it. You can then also use that component anywhere to insert. Yeah. This is sick. I'm very happy with this. So let's just try it again, I guess. Let's say, let's move this over here. I want to reset this position to 0. Put that there, and let's say mesh monkey GX over here. Monkey is an issue for some reason. Draw generic panel. Why is monkey an issue? Great progress, initial steps to get something working. We're a bit heavy, but it all pays out. Yeah, it was definitely a heavy investment. I guess like all things considered, it was only a couple weeks. And it really pays off, I think. So the question here is, this is material. This doesn't have a material. So this can only get drawn if we have a material, because this currently does not have one. So let's fix that first. Let's say panel material pull what do you think? Is not none? Open the scenes. Scheme not found in post blend file load because we happen to be on the material. Yeah, okay, so we're not showing the panel here, but I think in this Blender file, I've done something weird. So I'll just look into that. In any case, we just add the material. This is throwing issues for some reason. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because of the load earlier. Active editor not found is bad. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think that's just my fault. I think that's just the hook error. So scheme not found on what? Scheme not found on material for monkey. Why is scheme not found on material for monkey? Shouldn't it be? Check the init. Right, material, scheme. Yikes. I don't know why that doesn't exist. Update component form. Oh, because we do context.object for the form. We want to do dang, we have to contextualize all of this, don't we? We need the same logic. We just need to dispatch on a different context. Right? Like this is what we need to do. And I don't know how to do that without we could have 3 different that feels weird. We could have this be a function that gets called by this. Right? And then this would be update form self context. Do we use self in here? No. We're not going to pass self in. Context, and then this will be a small function, so we can hard code it. Right? I don't love this being a different function for all three. Because they don't even have, yeah, they don't have different behavior or anything. So like, this feels really awkward, but I can always go back and refactor it. We just need it to work for the moment. So these have to be used then. I'm not somebody who will shy away from copying and pasting code like this if the abstraction isn't immediately clear. So that should be object mesh and material. We copy that, get out of here. Open Blender. Open Scheme Scenes. There's still, I think, a hook issue there. But that is just this. So we've got Suzanne here, we've got cube, and we've got this other thing. And did I already apply the material? I guess I did. Right, if we remove the material slot, this doesn't have a material. So if we save this and we export, Suzanne should not have anything on it. But the other two do. And then if all we're going to do is select the material, save and export. Not even going to worry about the components. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is not work with components. We're trying to achieve functionality. So anytime you use a material that has had the component data applied to it, you will get that as expected. So that's really cool. So let's say we wanted like a plane here, and I want to scale this to 10, and I want to drop it down on the Z just a little bit. And I want this to have the material that gets replaced. And I export, and I haven't touched a single Bevy component at all in that flow. But we have a plane that had its material replaced. We need to put this down a little bit lower. It doesn't look as cool up here. Let's do -1, I guess, and export. And that's really cool. It's really cool to not have to touch components. Like, not just have an interface for adding them, but once added, not have to touch them at all. Right? Like, I get to work in Blender with Blender abstractions to apply these materials, which then are already handled because I already wrote the code for it. So you're building up abstractions that you can use to actually build levels rather than dealing with individual component data, which is very, very cool. Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point for today. This is sweet. Unfortunately, wireframes are broken on main. But this is very, very, very cool. Saving that. I'm very happy with this. So at this point, we can do objects, components on objects, any nodes, right? Components on meshes, components on cameras, lights, which are nodes, components on materials, which get shared whenever you reuse that material inside of Blender. Collections don't exist, right? So I'm curious about the behavior of instantiated components, but I think I'm going to leave that. I think that's it for today. That is significant progress. Maybe I'll try to backport this to 0.15 for Saturday, and then we'll integrate it. And that'll be the real test. So this was just a demo test, right? Trying to make sure that everything works as expected. There's still more work to do. We still need to kind of like push out from it works for toy projects to it works for more and more and more components. But I'm very happy with what we did today. So thanks everyone for hanging out. And I will see you Saturday. And thanks for the suggestions, Xavier.